We're here this morning to discuss the aftermath of the 2012 elections, local elections and the London elections. And I'm here with Peter Taaffe, who's the General Secretary of the Socialist Party, to discuss what the results mean, what they mean particularly for the fight against austerity in Britain. Peter, Labour across the board seems to have made massive gains. What does that mean, especially where in many places they're a party that are actually making the cuts?
Yes, I mean, Labour has gained, I think it's about 800 seats in the election. The Tories have done terribly badly. The Liberal Democrats are in a desperate situation. Even a penguin beat them in Edinburgh. They're in meltdown at the present time. But the reason why the results have come out as they have done is people seized the opportunity to punish the government on cuts, on the general attacks on working class living standards, on the scandal of the Murdoch empire, of a shadow state and the involvement of the government, particularly of Cameron, in that. All of those factors played a role in the election, and they discounted for the time being that many Labour councils, in fact there's not a single Labour council that has stood out against the government. They're really transmission mechanisms for carrying on the cuts. Now that they've got these majorities on a national basis, now that they seem to have won the London Assembly and so on, the working people will now expect them to resist the government. There's no excuse now.
And so obviously there is a lot of anger. We've seen anti-cuts campaigns all across the country. Has there been protest votes? And if so, where has that gone?
Well, there's been some protest votes for candidates who have stood up to the cuts, have criticised the government and so on. But first of all, if you look at the position of the Labour Party, people have voted against the government. They've not voted for the Labour Party. I mean, Ed Miliband is basking in this as a return of his popularity. It's nothing of the kind. He has a -41 ratings in the opinion polls. And it's been difficult in this election where there's been a polarisation for those parties who've really stood up to the cuts, who fought, who supported the strikes against the cuts, which we, the Socialist Party and other people have done. And remember, there's a strike coming only days after this election, on May the 10th, of the PCS, of the civil servants and so on, of university lecturers, and that strike, we believe, will be successful. That's where the real struggle, frankly, is taking place at the present time. But we stood in these elections under Tusk, and we did well in some parts of the country. I mean, Dave Nellist, unfortunately, has been defeated. In Coventry, they think that this will be the end of Tusk in this election. In London, it's the first time out in reality across the board. So we got a good vote, but not yet breaking through. I mean, this is only repeating what the pioneers of the Labour movement have done. Tony Mulhern stood at a month's notice in Liverpool, where there was an arbitrary, almost dictatorial decision by Joe Anderson without a referendum to impose a mayor on the people of Liverpool. And by the way, where the votes have taken place in other areas, most areas apart from Bristol, 9 out of the 10, have actually rejected the idea of a mayor, and yet he got a good vote in that election. There's something to build on now in the struggle against the cuts.
Well, that was my next question, actually. How do you see Tusk going forward out of these elections?
We must remain firm. We must keep our nerve. This is the first time that we've had really across the board struggle. We have to stand in as many areas as possible. We shouldn't be put off by the jeers of those who have no real alternative to working people at the present time. We have to remain firm. We have to be prepared to stand in elections to establish the name of Tusk. Unfortunately, most people probably, apart from certain areas where we had well-known personalities, the name of Tusk is not really known. So we've decided to stand in this election. We've made a mark. Now we have to build on that, and we will build on that in the period we're going into.
So it's the Trade Unionist and Socialist coalition. I mean, do you think there is a big support for socialist ideas at this stage?
I think we have to build the support. I think that there's a mood of anti-cuts. I think there's an anti-Tory mood. I think there's a feeling of working people that we want something different. But our job is to engage in the battle, but also to raise the question of an alternative society. So long as we remain on the basis of capitalism, it's inevitable that these cuts will take place. And we have to remember, despite the support, or seeming support for New Labour, This Labour Party, New Labour, rests on the foundations of capitalism, and therefore will be compelled, unless they step outside the bounds of capitalism, will be compelled to carry through cuts. And that's the crucial question. Those people who say, oh, well, you can't succeed outside of the Labour Party, what's their alternative? To sit in Labour parties and just be acquiescent to the cuts? No, we have to give working people a lead.